Okay, I took a little break there and I reviewed the footage a little bit. I noticed that this type is not going to conform to the types that I set up, and it will also not be a method when um, when this method send tries to make that type name into a method and send it to the object is not going to recognize that method, so that will cause an error. So I'm going to add this so that if there are no types, this block doesn't run. And then, so normally what I would do to address a data issue like this is I would make a conditional statement, like an if statement, that says if it says each or cray, then actually store it as a creature. Um, yeah, I think I'll do that. I believe this is the only card that's in Pig Latin, so I'm gonna guess for now that there aren't other random types in this data set. Um, type equals creature. And then what I'm going to do is capture any errors that happen here. Unrecognized type, and then print out whatever was in that card type field. So now I think I'm ready to run this again and see how it goes. Okay. Cool. So we have enchant player, enchant creature. Let's look at what that, but overall though, I think we probably got most of the cards into the database now. Let's take a look at our card.count. Yep, okay. So in terms of these planes, schemes, conspiracies, and vanguards, they are in the database. They're just not registered as those types. Phenomenon, I can't say I'm familiar with that one. I'm comfortable with this data not going into the database. However, enchant creature and enchant player. Oh, it's probably enchant creature and enchant world. Enchant player, enchant world. Let's see what this. Okay. I'm actually going to jump back into this smaller file. Put a space after it. 874. Okay, let's see. Right, because it's only within types. Okay. Types, and then there's a colon, and then there's this. A new line. Some white space. And that, and then another space. Let's see if I can get see if I can match that. Okay. Okay. So what I can do is I could either not worry about it, or I could run it again and print out the card name when it encounters that. So running it again, it is going to put cards in the database again. Duplicates, in other words. And I do already have a few duplicates because the first time it ingested a couple hundred cards. So the way I'm going to deal with that is the next thing to talk about. So for right now, I'm just going to take out the save so that nothing will be actually put into the database. And see where these unrecognized enchant types are showing up. Word Mail, Loose Lips, Curse of the Fire Penguin, Charm School. Okay, so a lot of these are unglued. Let's look at the first one, Word Mail. Enchant creature. Okay, so this incorrectly is listing the types. That's something that I can report to MTGJSON. What they should have is a type enchantment and a subtype aura. Probably they have that for everything that's not unglued. I'll take a look at my other false ones here. Curse the Fire Penguin, Loose Lips. See if they're all enchant creatures. Come on. Oh, right, I wasn't able to make that hit. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do is if I see enchant, I'm going to call it an enchantment and skip the rest of the types. And then continue. So continue is when I want to skip the rest of the loop and go back to the next. If I wanted to go back to the next type, I would skip the rest of the loop and continue, but I would actually want to get out of this loop and go down to the next thing, so I'm going to do break. Okay, and then I'll just remove the cards that I have. So normally it is really useful to be able to run these things multiple times. And the way that I can prevent a card from being saved twice is by using a validation. That way I can basically make it a rule that no two cards can have the same name. And that way when a card attempts to be saved with the name that already exists, it will just fail to save. Okay, so I got all of the enchant warnings out of this. Great. And then card.count 17506. Okay, so our script so far is at 39 lines. And we have finished the first step of ingesting the card names and types and colors. Let's take a look at our data. Okay, so I'm seeing, right, the reason I see 64 is not because there are multiple types, it's because there's a single type. Okay, great. Great, so we see an odd number for artifact creature, even numbers for things that have just a single type. Bitter Blossom is 128 plus 4, so that's like a tribal enchantment or something like that. Cool. The colored data looks legit. There are some odd numbers, mostly even, powers of 2. Converted mana cost, data looks correct. And I don't see any obvious problems. In fact, this seems... Oh, I saw a bunch of nulls there real quick. But that's probably just because Vanguard stuff. Or was it? Okay. Yeah, these are planes, I'm guessing. Cool. So the next ingestion is going to be, okay, so I said that I would update this so that it would load the file from the web rather than loading it from a local directory. I'm going to postpone that for now and move forward with getting the actual data that I need, which is the image URLs. So I'm going to make a new task, just images. And since the title's a little misleading, I'm only going to make sure to describe it and say add multiverse ID and image URL to existing cards. Okay. So I'm thinking about, okay, so my first thought is to do card.all.each. And since obviously we're using the logic of our card class, we need to make this rely on the environment. And then we would basically open like Scryfall.com, or it's probably api.scryfall card, and then I'll punch in the card.name. Okay. So remember that Scryfall asks us to only do 10 per second. So I have a way of saying each in batches. So let's look that up first just to make sure we don't forget and we try to be a good neighbor to Scryfall. Each in batches. Find in batches. Find in batches. In groups of. Actually, find each, looping through. Okay. Start, finish, error, unignore. So find in batches, do group.each. Okay. If I use this, it will batch them up, but it doesn't seem to put a spot for me to pause after each batch. This one seems to give me the group so that I can run code. Yeah, exactly. Here we go. This is very similar to what I'm going to be doing. So find in batches. And the batch size is 10. So I'm going to say nil, nil, and 10. Yeah, let's start primary key start from. And then we're going to sleep for 1 second. Okay, so now the process of actually accessing the Scryfall U API. So let's see if there's already a client here. No, they have a Java, but no Ruby. So I'll probably just make like a really bare bones way to handle this. That's text. Okay, so I don't want it as text. I think I can do exact without saying text. So they have the plus where there's a space. Not sure what they do for commas. Card names are case insensitive and punctuation is optional. You can drop apostrophes and periods. Okay. So for both exact and fuzzy. Okay, so we're probably going to use exact and cards named exact equals, and the card name is capital letters are okay, so that's fine with me at this juncture. And then I'm just going to replace the spaces with plus signs. Spaces do sometimes work in the context of making programmatic URI calls. Actually, sometimes they work in the browser too. The browser can sometimes convert them into the encoded space. Might be worth a shot. Let's see, do I need a I need a key authentication. Does not require any authentication. Okay. So they're asking me to delay between all requests. So I'll move forward with this. No, I'll do what they asked. I'll do what they asked. I'll just change it to batches of 2. And then I'll sleep for 1/10 of a second. It's not precisely what they asked, but I do want to pursue doing this in batches because loading all of the cards at once is just not a great idea anyway. With a data set this size, it's pretty much a non-issue, but when you're implementing this technique, you might be using like more of a much larger data set. So let's see if we can get this to work, partly for that reason. Okay, so hitting a REST API, this is the kind of thing that should be second nature to me. But the fact that I have to double check everything and look it up, but maybe that will be helpful for the informative nature of the video. So open, what I'm referring to here is a Ruby library known as OpenURI. And so when I open a URI, it gives me content like this. I think the body I guess f.each line is gonna deal with the body there. But I don't want to go line by line for this. I think result and let's say we're going to start at 19.823. Just for testing purposes, we'll go down to 19.839. Okay. Now I can say rake cards ingest images. Okay. Find in batches, wrong number of arguments. Okay. So these are the way this is listed out, it looks like there are multiple arguments to the method. But the way it's documented, it looks like they are actually just keys of a hash, meaning that there will be a single argument, which is a okay, so an object, which is a collection, is a single object that has multiple objects inside it. And that is the type of object that is being passed to this method as its argument. Now the method's signature as documented here looks like it resembles the way that methods are documented when they have arguments, but I can tell a difference now. Normally it would be the argument name and then an equals sign and then the argument default, and then the second argument name and then an equals sign and then the argument default. Since they're using a colon here, that is indicating that this is actually a special hash notation and that these arguments are hashes. So the fact that this is telling me it expected 0 arguments instead of 1 is weird, but that might just be some kind of implementation detail that's going over my head. So I am going to stick to the traditional hash notation. Batch size, start, finish. Oh yeah, end is not usually used as an argument name because end is a special word in Ruby. Finish, and then batch size. Okay. Undefined method body for string. Okay. So let's just print out the result. String IO. Can I do read? All right, that's some data. Let's just get one piece of data right now. Just make a line break between each one here. Okay. So I can now tell this that this is JSON, and then I can reformat text. Let's see. Indent selection? That didn't really. I may have like a JSON tool, or I could do so online. But for now, I'll just take a peek here. That's a little weird that that is a line break instead of space. I can see that there are a few line breaks. They're all supposed to be spaces though. Luckily, the only data that I'm going to grab from this is its multiverse ID and its image. And I think what I'll be taking is the ping. Let's see if this is a good size for... Oops, okay, it's pretty big. It's a megabyte. Darn. Love this card, by the way. So let's look at their small or normal. Let's look at the normal. And wait, let me see if I have any actual way to deal with this. So the resources, this, does it tell me? No, let's see. How big is this image? Network. Images. Okay, I'm not sure how to use this tool set to determine the size of this image. Here we go. No. Okay. So the fact that this does not have rounded corners is a problem for me because if I want to have background colors, I want them to go into that space around the corner. I'm thinking about using the ping images. I don't know if images that are at 1 megabyte is a real problem for modern network devices and mobile devices. It could be. It's on the borderline, I think. If I decide in the future to use smaller images, I will be able to just leverage the script that I've already written and just add a line to it that sources that image. So I'm going to say, okay, so I'm going to just make sure I can reach properly into the object here and get the part that I need. So I'm going to grab multiverse ID. And card data image URIs ping. Okay, so this is another thing that's putting off a little alarm for me. I imagine that not all of the cards are going to have a ping. Again, this feels like something that I'll care about when I get to it. I have a lot of luxuries because this is a personal project. I'm not working for anyone. So I get to decide what's important and when. So I'll try running this script again. See if that spits out data that looks reasonable to me. Looks perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting that into my database. And they use the term URI. I use URL. I just want to double check that that is what yep, URL, okay. Here we go. Okay, so now I'm going to take out the start and finish. And I could, okay, so when I create a long-running script like this, and I'm going to test it out, I like to have a sense of whether it is still running, because usually the first time I run things, they don't work, and sometimes they get hung up in a way that doesn't give me any feedback or response, or so it's often a good practice to print something out while you're running through a loop. However, printing things out actually slows down the loop like tremendously. So this is already a slow loop because we're making it pause. Okay, so in this case, I'll just go ahead and print out the finished copy of the card, and I have to also save the data. Okay, we got a little, oh, 4 not found. Okay. By the way, it appears that not dealing with the spaces is working out for us. So that's a nice thing that we don't have to do. Let's see what came after little girl. Let's see what card was after that card. Look at me, I'm R&D. Okay, so the ampersand is... The ampersand is an important character in HTML, especially in URLs, but also in the body of a HTML document. My first sense of what to do is just to skip over, like to do something called rescuing that exception and just kind of skip over it. But it seems vaguely possible that there would be an ampersand in a card name. And like I said, I'm trying to support the unhinged cards, especially any reference to R&D. Love those guys. So, I mean, just imagine all the people who want to write articles as if they're R&D. So we need this card. So let's actually make it work. What I'm going to look for first is URL escape. URI escape, of course. Encode. URI is escape encode. Let's see what this does. And I'm not going to put my limit in here. What I'm going to do is just kick it off. And then if I want to stop it, I can use this keystroke Control C. Okay, so it didn't work anyway. Okay, so URI escape is a module, so I'm not going to name it like this when I call it. Let's see if my environment just naturally... Okay. URI.escape. Okay, so rather than naming escape, it looks like I can just say URI.encode. Let's try that out. Huh. So the same card caused it to fail. Okay, so I guess this is a little different from URI encoding. This is HTML encoding. Because ampersand does exist in URIs, but it doesn't exist in HTML. So let's look at HTML, escape, Ruby, CGI escape HTML. That's from 2009. I'll look at something a little... Although, if it ain't broke. That's what I want. Okay, so another card name, this time with parentheses. And it looks like rather than handling characters, it might be better to remove them. So I'm gonna substitute anything that is not a letter with nothing. And at that point, I probably will not need this anymore. I'll leave the spaces in. And that means that I have to make it this or this, not this and then this. Okay. Oh. We got a little further. Got to the Pegasus token, and Scryfall said no. So now we are going to indeed rescue this error. Begin. Do this. Rescue that. And go from there. It's actually sort of a blessing that this JSON file begins with the unhinged and unglued card names. Because if I had to do all those 6 or 8 adjustments to the script, but each time it had to run for 10 or 15 seconds before I got to it, that would be worse than the experience that we just had. So I'm sure some of you were feeling a little bit annoyed during that debugging, but it's kind of cool the way it worked out, and I didn't notice that FK more tokens. Interesting that the spaces were squeezed out of those names, even though I thought I wrote this substitution so that it would leave spaces. But as long as Scryfall is happy to search up those names, and that's the nice thing about R&D's discipline of not reusing names. Really reduces the number of bookkeeping tasks that all of the platform providers have to do. Like if I can just take all the non-letter characters out of a name, and I know that there's like there's not a card called weekend and then a card called weekend with no space. It's good discipline. Cool, so this is still going. It seems to be getting images and multiverse IDs. And so it looks like our task of ingesting the data might be complete. The next step is going to be to create a system to store associations between cards and list items, and then an interface to for content creators to say which cards they want associated with their list items, and possibly also some options about where they're displayed, like maybe on the left or the right. So I'll make that into a separate video. Remember to see all this work in action at waveswemage.com and follow the channel and get in touch. So talk to you then.